Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Economist Sustainability Week countdown to COP26. Delighted to have you all here. This panel is on developing future farming. We've got three fantastic speakers today to discuss this fascinating topic. I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Scarlett Benson. I'm the co-director of research for the Food and Land Use Coalition, which is a coalition of a number of different organizations working to transform food and land use systems. Firstly, before I do introduce the speakers, I just wanted to say why I'm personally so excited to be here. This is a topic very close to my heart, and I think many of the people on the call today and in the audience will understand sort of the urgency and the need to transform food and land use systems. The Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals all rely upon this system being transformed. And today I'd really love to focus a bit on kind of what that looks like and how we do it. So really getting into some specific examples and areas of where we need innovation and scaling up of ambition. So with all, I'll go down now into introducing the wonderful speakers. So first we've got Dirk Vost, who is the Senior Vice President for Regulatory Sustainability and Public Affairs at BASF's Agricultural Solutions Division. So thanks for coming here today. Next we have Didier Toubia, the co-founder and chief executive of the cultured meat company Alf Farms. And then finally we have Dan Blaustein-Vecchio. Sorry if I'm pronouncing these names wrong, guys, who is the Director of Food and Agriculture at the Breakthrough Institute, which is an environmental research group based in California. So having spoken to all of our fantastic speakers in advance, I have structured some questions and targeted some questions so that we can, get the best out of them and really learn from their experiences. But I do want to make this interactive and lively. So guys, please do jump in and add on and build on other comments of others. So firstly, let's start with Dirk. So I think, as you noticed, I provided a bit of a high-level context on the fact that we need to transform food systems. But what does this actually look like in your view? And coming from a business, I'm particularly interested in what you see as the role of business and industry. So over to you.
Well, thanks, Scarlett, and wonderful to be with you, and really, really glad to be part of the panel, and even more to drive this so important topic. And I think you mentioned a lot of aspects already, and what we will see in the next years to come, and most likely this will be one of the topics discussed today, is how can we accelerate the transformation of the agricultural food system. I think this is really something which is key, and it will happen. And it's just now the question of the magnitude and the speed. It's about affordable food, and how can we generate affordable food accepted by society with, let's say, limited impact on the planet. So what is the vision? And the vision you can describe maybe as a call for a better yield. So it's not only to produce more, it is to produce more and better. Really having, production within the planetary boundaries, looking at various cultivation systems, organics, vertical farmings, maybe even looking at the maritime as well. How to, let's say, get all the best out of it, respecting regional and dietary patterns. I think this is key. But on the other hand, I think it's key that farmers have to run their operations, let's say, profitable. And what we see is something what I would consider complexity to the power of 5. We are seeing a lot of, let's say, challenges on the resources. How can we reduce the resources? We're seeing a lot of challenges coming from the societal needs. On one side, to have enough carbohydrates to feed the people. On the other hand, the wish to produce with a less impact on the environment. We see more and more technologies coming and to be used by farming. We're seeing a tremendous amount of climate change being impacted. On one side, drought and heat and reduced yield. On the other hand, too much water and even no area of planting. And since the recent years, we're observing the 5th element, which is uncertainty. Trade wars, other, let's say, completely unexpected areas where we feel how global can we produce at the end? How regional and local do we have to, let's say, produce to really get the food around it? So to really close up the topic is creating partnerships, creating the momentum, delivering and deploying the technologies available to reduce the impact, but also to keep the productivities on areas where we can produce productivity and professionally and profitable to keep this up. And to really close it up in a way saying, in some areas of this world, we have a kind of food flat rate. Whenever you go into, let's say, a supermarket, you have the best quality, the best quantity, and the best variation available 24 hours a day, most likely. And in other areas, we don't have it. So how do we let's say, get the balance right of getting the food distributed, reducing the wastes in this regard, but on the other hand, let's say, producing in a way that it is also good for the planet now and in the years to come. This will be the acceleration, and it can only be done with partnerships. And that's why I'm also looking forward to the discussion with Dan and Didier today to see what kind of partnerships can we really form across value chains, even working in different fields. But my feeling is that we are really interacting in one system and finding now where's the right balance between those attempts. But there is a point of urgency. We shouldn't wait too long. We need to act now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fantastic. Really interesting. I mean, I'd love to hear about some examples of partnerships that you have been involved in, potentially at BASF or others that you know of that have been particularly successful. I mean, my view is that, and I'm sure similar to you guys, is that farmers need to be at the center of this. And so it's really these partnerships are about how we can enable and empower them to make the transition. I'm particularly interested in what the role of business is in supporting that. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that, Dirk.
Partnerships which we are creating is along the value chains, with partners being, on one side commodity traders, but also strong brand owners on one end. But on the other hand, partnerships are also generated on, let's say, deploying certain technologies. For example, when you look at the area of digitalization, drone technologies, and targeted applications, we have our own platform, Xavio, but Xavio as a digital platform and really looking into areas, we formed a joint venture with Bosch because we have the algorithms and the tools to, let's say, have the right diagnostics on the field, but we need Bosch and others to really bring this technology on the market. So it is really something which really has changed in the last years, that one company can't make it alone. We really have to put all efforts together to combat and challenge those topics along the value chain in the horizontal way, but also in the vertical way.
Fantastic. I think that's a great segue to actually move over to Dan, who does a lot of work on looking at different technologies in food and land use systems. So Dan, I mean, what do you see as the role of innovation, and are there any particular areas of innovation where you're very excited at the moment?
Thanks, Scarlett. And thanks, Dirk. I think I'd like to zoom out a little bit first, talk in a little bit more detail about those challenges that, Dirk, you were mentioning. So the role of innovation innovation plays a key role in addressing some of the dual challenges that we face today when it comes to agriculture. And those challenges are, to me at least, to reduce agriculture's land footprint, as well as its greenhouse gas footprint, while feeding a growing population. So today, agriculture already accounts for about half of the world's habitable land and accounts for something along the lines of 25% or 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that with hundreds of millions of people undernourished and food demand only growing, we need to feed the planet while shrinking that environmental footprint, as Dirk said. I think that ultimately is one of the top challenges of the next couple of decades. And at the Breakthrough Institute, we've been spending years researching what are the different food system transformations that are necessary. And innovation plays a key role in transforming the food system, although it's often honestly overlooked and certainly underfunded. I'd say that one of the top priorities when it comes to technological transformation and innovation is increasing crop and livestock yields, the amount of food produced per hectare or acre. The World Resources Institute recently estimated that to feed the world in 2050 with the yields of today, with the productivity levels of today, would entail clearing pretty much all of the world's forests and would exceed the Paris Agreement's climate targets, even if we eliminated all other greenhouse gas emissions from all other sectors. So clearly, increasing yields is a top priority. And that involves both innovation, both developing new types of seeds that are more drought tolerant, heat tolerant, stress tolerant, that are higher yielding. And it also involves simply providing much of today's modern technologies and information to farmers, to increasing fertilizer access in sub-Saharan Africa, increasing access to irrigation, to the package of modern agriculture tools that have for decades been responsible for increasing yields. But it will be incredibly challenging too, because as we know, there are increasing climate stresses, increasing impacts to agriculture and to farmers from drought, from extreme heat. So ultimately, we need what many people call a doubly green revolution, bringing the technologies of the past decades together with new technologies that allow people to grow more food more nutritiously with a smaller impact.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's really insightful. I mean, I think, again, it's a great segue over to Didier, who's involved in a very interesting area of innovation around cultured lab meat. So what do you see, Didier, as the role of cultured meat? Is this just a sort of a niche product that is going to be quite expensive and, essentially only be accessible to rich consumers? Or is it actually something that can critically transform the food system, significantly reducing our need for land by reducing meat consumption, traditional meat consumption? What is your view?
Mm-hmm. Yes. First, to echo Dirk's point about the urgency for managing successfully this transition toward a more sustainable food ecosystem, I wanted to pinpoint a misperception, which is common in the space, perception that the issue is how to feed 9 billion people in 2040 or whenever. That's not the issue. I think that's not of interest to the large public. There are too many issues to deal with right now, for them to be busy with issues which might be in 20 years. And we need to change this, the framing of the problem. The problem is really how to feed 7.8 billion people today. As Dan mentioned, there are close to 900 million people who do not have enough food on a daily basis. On the other hand, we waste 30% of the food we produce. And the food system as a whole, according to the latest statistics I have, accounts for close to 30%, which is an updated data actually of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And the livestock industry itself accounts for approximately half of it, according to the FAO. And when we're talking about going to net zero and leading transitions toward carbon neutrality, it's clear that we can't achieve those goals without first rethinking and managing a successful, inclusive, but also a just and equitable transition in the food system, starting with livestock and meat, which is the most impactful activity of the overall system. And we do see a role of innovation here, which is not only increasing the yields, which is a point which has been mentioned here, which is of course important. But again, we produce enough food to feed the world today, and the issue is with how the system is designed and built and managed, rather than with the quantity of food we produce. We believe that we need, on top of this, let's say, incremental innovation to better manage our systems or to be more efficient with our existing system, we did a second type of innovation, which is more a transformational innovation, talking about new production systems beside sustainable agricultural practices. We need also to implement new systems which are carbon neutral, which can provide good solutions and reasonable approaches, both in terms of nourishing the people, but also empowering the communities, increasing the resilience of the food system, and making sure that we provide the right nutrition, not only the calories to the people. And we do see those type of innovation as the key in achieving the Paris Agreement goals and the different SDGs which have been published in 2015. We're talking, for instance, about vertical farming, about cultivated meat, which is what we do at elephants, and I'll explain a word what it is about, but also maybe algae production, insects, or new forms of aquaculture, which can all bring, new sources of food in a decentralized and resilient manner. We do see cultivated meat as an important aspect of this inclusive transition of the meat sector by being a new form of domestication. Cultivated meat is actually about observing nature and how cells proliferate, divide, and organize themselves into a structured muscle tissue inside the animal, which is actually a meat growing inside the cow, for instance, or inside the cattle. And we're able to isolate the same cells, making the meat inside the animal's body, and we transfer them into a controlled environment where they can continue and divide and structure themselves into a similar muscle tissue. But on the outside, with a fraction of the resources, just the amount of water and nutrients needed for making the steak, we have the potential to reduce greenhouse gases emissions by 92%, land use by 95%, and water use by 87% compared to conventional agriculture. Ale Farm has been the only company in the space to commit to be carbon neutral by 2025. But we can also produce this meat in a closed system without the use of any antibiotics. Today, 700,000 people die from resistance to antibiotics globally. And this number should rise to 2 million people a year by 2040. Without contaminations, foodborne illnesses, or zoonotic diseases, and last but not least, avoiding the animal welfare issues associated with intensive farming. And just to complete this picture, the role we see for cultivated meat, to your point, to your question, Scarlett, is not to replace animal farming. We need cows, and cows have a role for regenerating the soils. We need less cows, maybe, but cows have a role when they're carefully managed and farmed in a sustainable way. We do see cultivated meat as a supplement to sustainable farming practices, as an additional system for making sure we can meet our goals in terms of nourishing the people, increasing the resilience of meat production, and leading this inclusive transition.
Thank you. That's fascinating. I mean, I'm so intrigued as to how quickly we think that cultured meat could really make a dent on the livestock market. And as you say, we don't need to live in a world where there's no meat, and there's a role for cows in mixed livestock production. But as you say, it's clearly a significant reduction. From our modelling, it's around a 2/3 reduction in Europe and North America to move towards sustainable food systems. What percentage of that reduction is going to be displaced by cultured meat in your view? And obviously there's other products, tofu, other plant-based meat, plant-based alternatives. So this is just one part of the solution, but I'm intrigued to know how much of the solution is it?
Yeah, exactly. So at Ale Farms, we're currently in the process of building a first production facility, which should be operational during the course of next year. And pending regulatory approvals, we expect to have a first soft launch of our products before the end of 2022. It will probably take a few more years to scale up the production capabilities and to launch on a larger scale cultivated meat products of Ale Farms and other colleagues over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years. We believe it might take until 2030 for cultivated meat to really become a mainstream product. So it will be a staged process. And based on the consumer surveys we have performed in various countries, like in the UK and in the US, in particular, consumers expect that when cultivated meat is widely available, it should represent approximately 40% of their annual intake of meat, meaning that based on consumer data, we expect that cultivated meat could on the mid to long term represent 40% of the global meat production. And the big difference between cultivated meat and plant-based is that while plant-based is an interesting product and there's a need for it, it's not meat technically, meaning it's plants, as per its name, the name of the category, which have been processed to resemble meat as closely as possible. And cultivated meat is not a different product. It's not an alternative to meat. It actually incorporates the same cells as the meat we can purchase today at the butcher shop or in the grocery store. It's just a different production process. That's why we're talking about a system-based approach, which is actually about producing meat according to different production systems, which would incorporate agriculture. And we do see cultivated meat as an extension of the initial domestication. Again, I can elaborate on that for a long time. I would like to leave enough time for my colleagues to react on that.
Fantastic. I was wondering maybe we could perhaps go back to Dirk, because I think you've got a lot of experience in GMO and navigating some of the kind of the policy regulatory issues around sort of some of these new products. What do you see as going to be the main challenges from a regulatory perspective for cultured meat, but also for other kind of innovations in this area?
Well, certainly, I think we need a kind of framework, and what we're currently seeing is on the, let's say, crop protection side is more and more regulations are kicking in, and fully not understanding also what Dan has said, but also what Didier alluded on, is saying, since the last 50 years, I think there was a Cornell study showing that the productivity in agriculture was reduced by 20% already. So it means, we need those innovation, let's say, to boost and drive to productivity, fully understanding it is not only the 2040 or 2050 point that Didier is saying, but it's really something which is happening now. Of course, it's about the waste, it's about the distribution as well. But we're seeing more and more stringent regulations on plant protection products, which certainly have certain, let's say, societal needs behind it. But on the other hand, is really, let's say, putting farming under pressure and productivity under pressure. We are seeing currently globally, we are still looking at new breeding technologies. Europe is opening up in the discussion of understanding new breeding technologies could help also to overcome climate change, let's say having more drought resistance or more climate resilient varieties. I think there is a change in the way of thinking, but it certainly will take quite a long time to really get, let's say, here a global level playing field, which we need in order to allow global trade. Even so, we just said in the beginning, there will be regional patterns, but on the other hand, we need global regulatory and we need a global playing field for do this. And there is another point I would like to point out, and Didier and Dan mentioned it as well, is the carbon emissions. Then you talked about healthy soil, and healthy soil are very, very important for productivity. And healthy soil on one side is introducing carbon and the real source of carbon sequestration, and of course also water holding capacity as well, and nutrition as well. So I think modern agriculture needs to go into this round. And what we're seeing, Scarlett, on your question and regarding a framework, we are seeing more and more frameworks on carbon trading. So carbon emission or carbon certificates generated by farmers as an additional value income stream, but also very clearly using the technologies available to reduce and avoid emissions in farming, but on the other hand, having really true sequestration in soil, and at the same time really increasing the fertility and the health of the soil to maintain productivity in areas where we see that land will be even more precious as we go along, as climate change is kicking in. And studies are published that productivity will go more and more north. The word Greenland may become not only an abstract word, but it certainly could become a very brutal reality for us. So the question is really, can we farm on those areas, and will we have enough food available? And here I like the comment also from Didier saying it will be a balance of various technologies. It's not either or. It's not only wheat on commodity farms. It is artificial meat. It is other elements as well as algae production, insects. We need to take all those elements into consideration to provide, healthy and affordable food for everybody in the future. And as you said, in the years to come, the months to come.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we need to have a way of being able to have these very healthy debates about what the way forward is, and within the transformation, there's so many kind of trade-offs that need to be considered at every level. And it's never clear to me exactly where those conversations need to be happening. I mean, I don't know whether you guys have any perspectives on how, perhaps, Dirk, again, I mean, you've talked a lot about partnerships and collaborations. Like, how do we work out what the answers to these are, both at the system level, but at a local level, and then move forward with a plan that's sort of democratically agreed upon, I suppose.
Maybe just three short comments. One is, I think we cannot rule innovation out of the game, because we are currently in a process that those threats have to be managed, and I think they're so urgent. We can't say, hey, come on, I don't want X or Y innovation. I think we need all the innovation to really maintain productivity, and also using other sources to feed and dietary pattern. For example, with BASF, we are joined from the World Economic Forum, the Climate Coalition. So we're really looking at distinct technologies across the value chain, how to reduce the carbon emissions on agricultural land, fully also, let's say, looking at what Didier is saying in feed and meat production, but also on the acres itself. And you can be very local. For example, with a local bakery here, we created a bread with a very high biodiversity intent, because we felt, if consumers start also to pay a little bit more for the love of bread, this value then is transported down to the farmer, and you see that biodiversity. We call it lark bread. Lark is a small little window nesting in the field, bird nesting in the field, and with some flower strips around it. But what we see is that consumers are taking it up, and farmers earn more money through biodiversity in combination with productivity. So locally, you can demonstrate with these pilots, it really can be done. And you just have to have a certain creativity, but also a certain kind of entrepreneurial risk-taking to really get going. But you need the partners. We need the local bakery. We need the miller, and certainly the farmer. And then a new value chain system has really been deployed and very, very successful.
Very cool, very inspiring. Yeah, I mean, the work that we've done in the Food and Land Use Coalition is very much kind of a modeling at a systems level in one of our reports, the Growing Better report. And we showed that there wasn't this trade-off at a systemic level between feeding everybody, moving towards more sustainable agricultural practices. And a lot of that relied upon essentially taking the pressure off land, which has been, I think, a key theme today. But there are trade-offs when you get to these sort of more local levels. And I know that's something you, Dan, have been doing a bit of thinking about when it comes to cultured meat. And there's essentially a trade-off between maybe the energy transition and freeing up land. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Of course. First, I wanted to emphasize something that Dirk said, which is that we can't adopt an either-or perspective when it comes to addressing many of these environmental and societal challenges. I think sometimes when people talk about alternative meats, there's this notion that it is this either-or choice, that we have to shift and eliminate our livestock systems in favor of some plant-based or cultured meat diet and production systems. But in truth, we will continue to see this growth, I believe, of conventional livestock systems in much of the world, as well as this new alternative set of production systems. And we need to look at how to really improve both sets at the same time. So putting cultured meat aside for 1 second, demand for conventional meat continues rising globally, even as we see companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and Omnipork and kind of Eastern Asia take off. We still see production of meat growing. And as Didier, you said, we need to think not just about 2050, not just about 2040, but about today as well. And there are some clear emerging technologies, some already on the market, that can help ranchers and farmers and other livestock producers reduce their emissions this year, next year, and into the future. So one innovation that I've looked at a lot on that side is the use of feed additives like algae-based feeds that can be given to beef cattle as well as dairy cattle and help cut their methane emissions, which the IPCC recently reported is a top global priority that helps essentially buy us some more time to reduce CO2 emissions. But on the cultured meat side, I think it is really exciting to see all the innovation that's happening there. It's also, from a research perspective, really unclear what the environmental impacts will be, since we don't have any commercial scale cultured meat facilities out there yet. Just Foods sells some cultured chicken in Singapore, but it's at a very small scale. And another thing too, I think, is we need some clear comparisons between different cultured meat products and their actual animal-based products. So I'm curious, Didier, you said, for instance, that cultured meat from Ala farms would be 90% at least less greenhouse gas intensive than conventional production. Is that compared to beef, which has a really high carbon footprint, or to chicken or fish, which in some places can have a very low carbon footprint? I'm quite happy to hear about Ala Farm's commitment to source 100% renewable energy or clean energy. I think that all cultured meat companies eventually should adopt that type of carbon neutral goal, and really try to seek efficiencies and clean energy sources, because the production process, and I'd love to hear more from you about that, can be quite energy intensive and therefore quite greenhouse gas intensive compared to some of the less carbon intensive animal products we have out there, like chicken.
Didier, please feel free to come in on that point.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thanks, Dan, for raising it. First, I agree with you, and that the potential benefits of cultivated meat are not equal in comparison to any conventional production methods and according to any species. First, chicken today is conventional chicken production is a very efficient way to produce protein, both in terms of feed to food ratio. I believe you need 1.4 gram of protein from feed to produce 1 gram of protein from chicken meat, which is super efficient. As a comparison, cows or beef is 9 to 1. You can also grow chicken to slaughter edge within 12 weeks, and the environmental impact of chicken is very low. So there might be less advantage of cultivated meat in the chicken space. We do believe that in the beef and cattle space, cultivated meat will provide a significant benefit over conventional methods. While again, we need to differentiate between different methods. You're right. It depends very much if you're talking about grass-fed intensive farming, different regions of the world. The US, for instance, has more efficient ways to grow cattle and has lower emission per kilogram as compared to other countries. And again, I believe that at the end of the day, we need to invest in transitioning farmers to sustainable practices and methane reducing solutions. And we see more and more products being launched. I know that BSF is also working on some solutions to reduce methane emission by conventional cattle and manage these cattle, the cattle farming within from an angle of regenerative agriculture and sustainable practices, and just regenerating the soil, as Dirk mentioned, and sequestrating the carbon back into the soil has a great role in achieving the Paris Agreement goals. And beside those this transition toward sustainable farming practices, we need new systems to supplement this more extensive this less productive approach with new production systems to meet the increasing demand for animal protein, which should tend and should have this ambition to be carbon neutral. And at Ala Farms, to your question, we're partnering with a few different entities, and we might communicate around those partnerships in the next couple of months to really build from scratch an infrastructure which will ensure the most efficient way to produce meat in terms of carbon emission, water use, and closed loop production systems. And we put a lot of focus on this topic. Cultivated meat actually has a potential for disconnecting the production of meat from the availability of local natural resources and being very resilient. to not only to disruptions of the supply chain, but also to climate change. Actually, we're talking about a decentralized production system. The vision of AgriFarms is to produce high quality nutrition for anyone, anytime, and anywhere, and to rethink the production system based on local, decentralized, and agile production. And that's key, not only post COVID-19, but also in terms of, in light of the recent climate events we've seen increasing in terms of occurrence. AgriFarms has been the first company, together with our partners, 3D bioprinting solutions, to produce meat in space. And we're actually using our space program as a Formula One team, to kind of really test new technologies and new approaches in the most let's say, in the strictest environments, the toughest environments possible, near zero resources and extreme climate conditions, so that we can then incorporate the solutions on Earth to provide the right solutions for the people here.
That's super cool. I'm imagining that Matt Damon, when he was starring in The Martian, probably would have appreciated some meat as opposed to having to eat potatoes. Very cool. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to ask each of you for one very quick statement on what you would like to see coming out of Paris. Not Paris, 5 years ago, of Glasgow, COP26, and really potentially in support of the innovation that you've been talking about today. So, Dirk, should we go to you first?
Well, thanks. I will do. First of all, I think I would wish a really strong, let's say, message from COP26 is really to break down ideological barriers. It is not about, let's say, organic farming versus conventional, or GMO versus non-GMO, or one region against the other. For me, it is very clearly in four aspects. One is we have to end hunger. I think this is very clear and came out today from all of us. It is about de-risking the food system in various instances, which I feel are necessary, protect the resources or minimum impact on the environment, and certainly, let's say, driving all technologies in digitalization, innovation, bioscience, but also, as it artificial meat and others, to really, let's say, achieve this target. Because at the end of the day, it's really, let's say, reducing the impact of agriculture and the food system on the planet, and certainly feed the people with affordable and healthy food. And Didier, you made the point, not in 20 years, but also now. I think that is key.
Dan, over to you, briefly.
Thanks, Dirk. So I think there's a widespread view that simply getting rid of government subsidies in agriculture, shifting them, and otherwise rationalizing the market is sufficient to fix agriculture. But as the economist Mariana Mazzucato says, fixing markets is not enough. It's never enough. Government, not just the private sector, but government needs to take an active role to shape markets and to create them and tilt the whole playing field in the direction that we want. So just to emphasize what Dirk said, I would love to see at the next COP, governments committing to increasing their agricultural R&D budgets, to really committing to particular moonshots, to cutting the price of alternative proteins, for instance, 50%, cutting methane emissions from beef 80%, to developing fertilizers that have a fraction of the carbon footprint that they currently do today. Commitments like that.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a very, very powerful role of government in creating this sort of enabling innovation ecosystem. Absolutely. And then Didier, over to you for the same question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, to echo what Dirk and what Dan just said, I think that what's key is really to break the silos and to work as an ecosystem, which is always the hard thing to do, meaning align the interests of everyone toward a common goal. When the ecosystem for agriculture and meat is so complex and so socially interconnected with many other adjacent systems. At AgriFarms, we believe that we need, on one hand, to connect farmer subsidies to the environmental impact of farming practices and to account for the real cost of food, while at the same time investing in transitioning the farmers to sustainable practices and methane-reducing solutions, for instance. Third, investing in transformational innovation and new production systems. while we will have to make sure that all the strategies rely on ensuring the benefits of the green economy transition are equally distributed. And last but not least, focus on consumer education, which is always key at the end of the day for a more responsible consumption of food.
Amazing. That was very inspiring. So thank you to the three speakers, Dirk, Didier, and Dan, and also thank you to the audience for joining us today. That was super interesting. So yes, and join us for the next session, which will be starting shortly. And goodbye for now. Bye-bye.